These are 7 features hidden inside classic Mercedes-Benz vehicles that most owners never knew existed, and some that even the dealerships forgot to mention. From a wiper system so mesmerizing it could literally hypnotize you, to a secret partnership with Porsche that saved an entire company from bankruptcy. These aren't just Easter eggs, they're proof that Mercedes-Benz engineers in the 1980s and the 1990s operated on a completely different level, one where accountants took a back seat and brilliant obsessive engineers refused to compromise on anything. Let's start with a feature that, if you've ever seen it in action, you never forgot it: the Monoblade. One single windshield wiper mounted dead center on the windshield. If you grew up in North America and you saw a W124 E-Class rolling through traffic in the rain, you probably did a double take. Just a single wiper. And it moved in this strange, almost alien pattern across the glass, reaching into corners that no conventional wiper system could touch. Mercedes called it the eccentric clean sweep system, but everyone else called it the Monoblade. And calling it just a single wiper is like calling a Swiss watch just a clock. Here's what was actually going on underneath that arm. Inside the hub, Mercedes engineers designed a cam-type device with a set of small concentric gears and an articulating mechanism built directly into the wiper arm itself. As the wiper swept across the windshield, the arm physically extended outward toward the corners of the glass, then retracted as it passed the top to avoid overextending. The result was an almost perfectly square white pattern, not a simple arc, a square. That gave the Monoblade 86% coverage of the total windshield area, 6% more than what is legally required by the NHTSA from a single arm. The system first appeared on the W201 190E in 1982, then spread to the W124, the W202 C-Class, and the W210 E-Class. The primary reason was not just aesthetics or novelty, it was aerodynamics. That single arm created noticeably less wind resistance than a dual wiper setup, and when you are engineering a car for sustained Autobahn speeds north of 200 kilometers an hour, every fraction of drag matters. The W124 achieved a drag coefficient of just 0.28, remarkable for its era, and the Monoblade played its part. But here is where the story gets interesting. Internal Mercedes research discovered that the wiper could have a hypnotizing effect on drivers. That sweeping, rhythmic, almost meditative motion across the glass was apparently a little too soothing. And beyond the trance-inducing qualities, the system had real-world problems. Specialized replacement blades were difficult to find, and in high-speed mode, the heavy single arm introduced a slight rocking motion to the entire car, which is not exactly the experience you want in a luxury sedan. The real nail in the coffin was cost. Even though one wiper looked simpler than two, the Monoblade's internal mechanism was actually more complex and expensive to produce and repair than a standard dual wiper system. So Mercedes killed it. Brilliant engineering, defeated by economics. Now where have I heard that before? The second feature is the vacuum-powered central locking system. Pop the right rear seat cushion out of a classic Mercedes, and you'll find something unexpected. A pneumatic pump, not an electric motor, not a solenoid, an air pump. Mercedes calls it the PSE, which stands for Pneumatic Special Equipment, and it's one of the strangest and most elegant solutions to a simple problem ever devised by an automotive engineer. Here's how it works. Turn the key or press the lock button, and the pump spins in one direction, creating a vacuum. That vacuum pulls air through a network of small tubes running throughout the entire car, and those tubes connect to actuators at every door lock. The plungers get sucked down, doors locked. When you unlock, the pump reverses direction, creating positive air pressure instead of vacuum, pushing those plungers back up. Doors unlocked. It's hydraulics, except with air instead of liquid. The PSE pump didn't just lock your doors either. That same pump, through that same network of tubes, also controlled the anti-theft alarm system, the pneumatic rear headrest retraction, manifold vacuum assist, and in some models, the multi-contour seat adjustment, which used inflatable pneumatic bladders inside the seat to customize the bolstering around your body. One pump, one network of tubes, controlling half the comfort features in the car through nothing but air pressure and vacuum. It was a masterpiece of systems integration. Did it work perfectly forever? Absolutely not. Those rubber tubes eventually dried out and cracked, and the pump diaphragms wore out. When the system failed, you'd hear a faint whirring sound from under the rear seat as the pump ran continuously, desperately trying to maintain pressure in a system that was leaking everywhere. Classic Mercedes owners know that sound by heart. But when it worked, and for many years it worked flawlessly, the experience was unlike anything else. You'd turn the key, and the car would exhale its locks open. The third feature is the big one, the Porsche-built 500E. If you've never heard this story, buckle up, because it's one of the greatest secret collaborations in automotive history, and it literally saved Porsche from going under. In 1989, Mercedes-Benz had a problem. Their engineering department was completely consumed with developing the new W124 E-Class, but they also wanted to stuff the massive 5-liter M119 V8 engine into the W124 chassis. The engine was wider than what the car was designed to accept, which meant the front fenders needed to be wider, the suspension geometry needed to be reworked, and the drivetrain layout had to be reconfigured. Mercedes didn't have the bandwidth. So they picked up the phone and called Porsche. Porsche needed the work. Badly. The early 1990s were financially devastating for them. Sales had cratered, and the company was genuinely facing the possibility of bankruptcy. The Mercedes contract wasn't just a nice project, it was a lifeline. The production process was extraordinary. Mercedes shipped raw body parts from their Sindelfingen plant to Porsche's facility in Zuffenhausen. Porsche's team assembled the bodies, incorporating their own custom fabricated front fenders, which were wider than standard W124 panels. Those assembled bodies then traveled back to Sindelfingen to be painted in Mercedes' paint shop. After painting, the bodies returned to Zuffenhausen for final assembly and engine installation at the Roslabau building. Each car made the round trip between the two factories twice, and the entire process took 18 days per vehicle. There is a little story most people miss about why Porsche ended up handling final assembly. The redesigned, wider front fenders couldn't physically fit through certain stations on Mercedes' own assembly line in Sindelfingen. Rather than spend a fortune reconfiguring the factory, Mercedes had Porsche set up a dedicated line at their own plant. The result was the 500E, a car the press immediately dubbed the wolf in sheep's clothing. From the outside, you had to know what you were looking at. It sat lower, the front and rear track were wider, but the proportions were subtle, restrained, unmistakably Mercedes. Under the hood, that 5-liter V8 pushed the car to 60 miles per hour in 5.5 to 6 seconds, through the quarter mile in 14.1 seconds, at 101 miles per hour, with a top speed electronically limited to 155 miles per hour, the gentleman's agreement among German manufacturers at the time. The wider drivetrain created one quirky consequence. The differential was so large that there was no room for a seat suspension in the center of the rear bench, making the 500E strictly a four-seater with two sculpted rear seats instead of three. By the time production ended in April 1995, exactly 10,479 examples had been built. Porsche knew the car internally as Type 2758 in their own nomenclature, and today a 1995 E500 Limited from the final batch of 120 cars sits on display in the Porsche Museum in Zuffenhausen. A car wearing a three-pointed star on its trunk, displayed in the museum of the company that actually built it. The revenue from the 500E program kept Porsche solvent long enough to develop the Boxster, which turned the company around for good. Mercedes got a legendary sports sedan, Porsche got to survive, and everyone won. The fourth feature is the automated seatbelt presenter. When Motor Week tested the 1985 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEC, their host and crew were genuinely baffled by a small mechanical arm built into the door frame. The SEC was a pillarless coupe with no B-pillar, which meant the seatbelt anchor was mounted far behind the front seat, almost unreachable without twisting your body. Mercedes' solution was an electromechanical arm that would physically grab the seatbelt and extend it forward, presenting it to the occupant like a butler handing you your coat. Open the door, sit down, close the door with the ignition on, and the arm would swing the belt forward into easy reach. The Motor Week presenters called it a real illogical touch and compared it to having a little gremlin inside the door. The system went through three distinct design variations between 1981 and 1991, and keep in mind the base price of the 500 SEC was $57,000 in 1985 money, which is nearly $170,000 today. For that kind of money, Mercedes figured you shouldn't have to reach for your own seatbelt. The fifth feature is one that changed the entire industry: the world's first production airbag and belt tensioner system. Every car you have ever ridden in has airbags, and the reason traces directly back to one car shown at one auto show in 1 year, the 1981 Geneva Motor Show. Mercedes-Benz, in partnership with Bosch, debuted the driver's airbag and seat belt pretensioner as a combined system in the W124 E-Class, the first time any automobile manufacturer in the world offered both technologies together in a series production vehicle. The key insight, and the reason it worked where previous airbag experiments had failed, was that Mercedes never designed the airbag as a standalone restraint. It was always conceived as a supplement to the seatbelt, which is exactly what SRS means, supplemental restraint system. The pretensioner would instantly tighten the belt in a crash, pulling the occupant firmly into the seat, while the airbag deployed a fraction of a second later to cushion the head and upper body. Two systems perfectly synchronized. The first cars equipped with this technology actually rolled off the assembly line in December 1980 and January 1981, with more than 100 S-Class sedans leaving the factory before the official public presentation in Geneva. 44 years later, that fundamental architecture, belt tensioner plus airbag working as a combined system, remains the standard in every car sold on the planet. The sixth feature is actually three hidden conveniences rolled into one. Classic Mercedes are full of what you might call quiet engineering, features tucked away without making them obvious. First, the hidden trunk keyhole. On many classic models, the metal key blade is removable from the key fob, originally designed so you could lock the glove box separately when you valeted the car. That same removable blade also fits a hidden keyhole located at an angle above the license plate on the trunk lid. If your battery dies and the electronic release won't work, that's your way in. No locksmith, no prying, just a feature the engineers planned for and hid in plain sight. Second, remote window and sunroof control. On many models from the late 90s and the 2000s, pressing and holding the unlock button on your key fob would open all 4 windows and the sunroof simultaneously. On a blazing July afternoon in Texas or Arizona, you could vent the entire car from across a parking lot before you ever touched the door handle. Most salespeople never mentioned it. And third, tunnel mode. Press and hold the air recirculation button on the dashboard and every window in the car closes simultaneously. Press and hold it again, and they all return to their previous positions. Designed for when you're entering a tunnel and want to seal the cabin quickly, but useful anytime you want all windows closed with a single action. The 7th and final feature is the integrated first aid kit with a dedicated compartment. Open the rear parcel shelf on a W116, W123, or W126, Mercedes built between 1973 and 1991, and you'll find a purpose-molded compartment designed to hold a factory-issued first aid kit. Not an aftermarket accessory, not a dealer add-on, standard equipment included from the factory in every single car. The kit came in a hard-sided box fitted precisely into a recess in the rear deck panel. Mercedes didn't simply toss a first aid kit in the trunk and call it a day. They engineered a specific location for it, integrated into the car's interior trim, accessible without opening the trunk, right there behind the rear seat where a passenger could reach it immediately. In a modern car, you're lucky to get a tire inflation kit instead of a spare. In a classic Mercedes, you got a fully stocked medical kit built into the architecture of the car itself, because the engineers in Stuttgart believed that a vehicle designed to protect its occupants in a crash should also be equipped to treat them afterward. And that's really the thread that ties all 7 of these features together. Every single one of them, the hypnotic single wiper, the pneumatic locking system, breathing through the body of the car, the secret Porsche partnership, the seatbelt butler, the airbag that changed the industry, the hidden keyholes, the first aid kit molded into the shelf, they all come from the same place, an engineering culture that asked what the best possible solution was before asking what it cost. That culture doesn't really exist anymore, not at Mercedes and not anywhere else. The W124, the W126, the 500E, these cars represent the high watermark of a philosophy that prioritized doing things right over doing things cheaply, and the market has noticed. Clean 500Es that sold for $15,000 a decade ago now trade between $30,000 and $42,000. W124s with over 500,000 kilometers on the odometer are still running, still daily driven, and still proving the point their engineers made 40 years ago. These weren't just cars, they were statements of principle, and every hidden feature, every over-engineered detail, every pneumatic tube and eccentric gear was a way of saying that good enough could always be better.